To God be the glory.
Hello. Welcome back to our study. We're in the book of Genesis. We've made it down to chapter 45, and we're in verse 25. You might remember from last time that Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers. And now they know that, yes, Joseph is indeed alive. He is second in command here in Egypt. And so Joseph sends the boys back to see their father and to bring all of the family to Egypt so that they can live during the rest of the famine that is in the land. Now, notice chapter 45, and let's look at verses 25 through 28. It says, "Then they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive." Now imagine that when the father hears that message. But they also say, "And he is governor over all the land of Egypt." And Jacob's heart stood still because he did not believe them. That's quite a message to be told, more than he can take in. He says, "No, this can't be right. I don't understand this. How could that be so? Not only is he alive, but he is governor of Egypt? How does that work?" In verse 27, "But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And then Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So he says it is enough. He has enough evidence now to know that, yes, indeed, Joseph is alive, and he can't wait to go and to see him once again before he dies. Now, let's go to chapter 46. Notice the first few verses there. It says, "So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac." Notice that, the prayerful and worshipful attitude of Jacob, remembering God and the blessings that he is receiving now being reunited with his son. Verse 2, "Then God spoke to Israel in the vision of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. So he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes." All right, notice here, I want you to look at this chart. Israel, of course, receives this message from Jehovah God, and Jacob says, "Well, here I am." Notice what Jehovah says in the parts of that. He says, "I am your God, the God of your father." And number 2, "Do not fear to go into Egypt." I'm sure there was some apprehension about going into that land. He says, it makes a promise here, "I will make of you a great nation, and I will go with you." In other words, you're not going to be alone as you travel to this faraway country. And also, Joseph will be with you until your death, and finally, you will not be buried there. And so he's going to return to Canaan land for the burial. In other words, God will be with Jacob until he dies. And so, yes, this is the time where he has to go to Egypt so that he can have food for him and his family. And so this is taking place, and God is reassuring him, "Yeah, I'm going to be with you. You're not going to be alone. Everything's going to be okay." And so we see that taking place here. Notice verses 5 through 7. "Then Jacob arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones, and their wives in the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So they took their livestock and their goods, which they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to Egypt, Jacob and all of his descendants with him, his sons and his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his descendants he brought with him to Egypt." And so now they're ready to make the journey, and they get all things together, all their possessions, all the things in which they had prospered while in the land of Canaan, and now that has to be transported to Egypt. And so quite an undertaking here. And so Jacob gets all things together, and they're ready to make that journey. Now, in verses 8 through 27, we see the listing of the family that is going down into Egypt. Now, we're not going to take the time to go through and read all of those names. You know those names, and you can read through those and study those yourselves. But I do want to notice a few things. The total of those who came with Jacob into Egypt, it says 66. And to these you have to add the number of Jacob, Joseph, and his 2 sons. That would be 4 more. So that gives you a total of 70 for the house of Israel going into Egypt. So at this time, we have 70 that are going to be in Egypt, the house of Israel, and you're going to see how they grow and how they prosper as you continue your study. When you get to Exodus, you'll see the great number that is there, that indeed they prospered while they were in the land of Egypt. Now, let's go chapter 46 and look down now to verse 28. This is after the listing of all the names. Verse 28, then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen. Remember, this is the land that Joseph had told the brothers, this is the land where you will be. It's good land, it's well watered, it's perfect for their flocks and their herds. And so he wants them to be in the land of Goshen. Verse 29, so Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Imagine what a joyous meeting that must have been for this father who thought that his son was dead, and now he has been restored to him. Verse 30, and Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. In other words, he's satisfied now with his life that he is able to see his son once again. Verse 31, then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. And so it seems that Joseph had a concern here, how they would be accepted by the Egyptians, and also so that they would get the proper land that they would need for their flocks and their herds. He says, this is what you're going to tell the Pharaoh so that he will know, yes, they're going to be separated. Yes, they're shepherds. We'll put them in the land of Goshen. And in that way, they can be taken care of there. And so this is the plan that is put into place to make sure that Pharaoh will give them what is desired. Now, in our outline, the next thing you will find is the establishment of Israel in Goshen and the Egyptian famine measures. This is chapter 47, verses 1 through 26. So let's look and see those things taking place. First, chapter 47, verses 1 through 6. Then Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds, and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan, and indeed they are in the land of Goshen. And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? Remember, Joseph had told them this is what was going to take place, and indeed it did. And they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, we have come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please, let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. You notice how their humility is shown time and time again, and their subjection to him. They refer to themselves as your servants. We are here to serve you. They are not here as an invading army to take control. No, they're here to serve him, and they only wish to be able to take care of their herds and their flocks. And so they let that message be known. And so time and time again, they make that statement of being servants to Pharaoh. Verse 5, then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, your fathers and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your fathers and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. Wow, notice that here not only is he giving them, yes, the land of Goshen, that's the land that they can have. It's well watered, it's perfect for their flocks and their herds, but also appoint someone over them to make sure that there is prosperity in the flocks and the herds, but even over my livestock. It says your people are probably better able to take care of these animals than are my people, and so you can look after mine also while you're looking after yours. Again, we see the confidence that Pharaoh has in Joseph and that he is going to trust him with his possessions as well. Notice verses 7 through 10. Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. And so he talks about his age, but he also talks about the difficulties that he has had in his life. And yes, many of those difficulties were because of his own decisions, some of the things that he had done, but also other things that he had no control over. And when he had suffered what he believed the loss of his son, when he thought Joseph was dead. And so he had been through much pain and through much heartache, and so he simply tells him concerning that. Now, it's interesting to note here that it says Jacob blesses Pharaoh, and Pharaoh accepts that blessing, verses 7 and also verse 10. Well, the greater always blesses the lesser. And so here we see the place of Jacob in this relationship. Now let's look at verses 11 and 12. And Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with bread, according to the number of their families. So Pharaoh gives them Goshen, and Joseph cares for the people and makes sure that they have those things that they need so that they can be sustained in the land. Now, the next section, 13 through 15. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe. We're still under the time of the famine. So that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money and was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into the Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. Then Joseph said, give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone. And so here's his plan for that. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses and the flocks and the cattle of their herds and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. It is interesting here that what you don't see is Joseph, as the leader of this operation, simply giving it to them for free. It's going to cost them something, and rightfully so. It would do no good just to give them things for free, because then they would expect that the rest of their life. You just take care of us. You're the government, and you give us everything that we need, and we don't have to provide anything. And so he wants it to cost them something, and indeed it does. And in that way, it is justified that they would be cared for with this food. Verse 18 through 20. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, we will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, before we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. And so here they would trade themselves and their land for food so that they can survive. As the famine continues, things are getting worse, but Joseph, in his wisdom, and being, of course, guided by God the Father, he is able to provide for them in this way, and also to make sure that they are making the payments that are necessary. Verse 20, Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. I'm sure Pharaoh was very pleased with what Joseph was doing. And here, as a king, Pharaoh is prospering, and he has control over all of these things. Verse 21, And as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their lands. And so it seems it was different for the priests because they had been provided for. Verse 23, Then Joseph said to the people, Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it came to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones. And so here he is providing a way for them to prepare for the future, and that they will have seed and grain, and they will have food in the future. Verse 25, So they said, You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. And so he sends the farmers back to tend Pharaoh's land. Really, this land belongs to Pharaoh now. And, of course, the priests are still exempt in this. 20% goes to Pharaoh, 80% to the tenants for food and for seed, and this was made into law. Now, the next part of our outline, we're going to see Jacob's last days, his final prophecies. We're going to see that in chapter 47, verse 27, all the way through chapter 50, verse 14. And we're also going to see in this next section provisions for Jacob's burial. This will be in chapter 47, 27 through 32. So let's notice as we finish up this chapter 47. It says, So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and they grew, and they multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph, and said to him, Now if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Putting his hand under his thigh. Remember, we saw that before. Custom of the time when making a promise and an oath that one would keep. Verse 30, he says, But let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And then he said, Swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. So he didn't want to be buried there in Egypt. That wasn't his land. That wasn't his home. And so after his death, he wanted to be taken back to the land of Canaan and buried there with his family. And of course, Joseph agrees and says, Yes, I will do that. I promise you that I will do that. Now, chapter 48, let's see the blessing of Joseph's sons. Chapter 48, starting with verse 1, let's look at 1 through 4. Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, Indeed, your father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Jacob was told, Look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of your multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And so what he is doing, he is adopting the sons of Joseph so that he can bless them, so they can have part of his inheritance. And so in this way, it wouldn't have to pass through Joseph. He adopts them directly. Verse 6, Your offspring, whom you begat after them, shall be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, and that is Bethlehem. And so here Jacob adopts Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and this gives Joseph a double portion of the inheritance, really, compared to the other sons and what they would receive. Jacob blesses the two sons. He makes them his own sons. And Jacob wants to give special blessing to the sons of Joseph. Because why? Because Joseph is his favored son. Now, verse 8. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, Who are these? And Joseph said to his father, These are my sons, whom God has given me in this place. And he said, Please bring them to me, and I will bless them. And so now the actual blessing is going to take place. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. And then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact God has also shown me your offspring. So here Jacob was thinking, I'll never even see Joseph again, because he thought he was dead. And not only has he seen Joseph again, but he's also seen Joseph's sons. And so what a great time of joy it is for Jacob. Verse 12, So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And then Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel, now watch this, he stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And so he's doing just the opposite of what would normally be done. Verse 15, And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers and Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude of the midst of the earth. And so here we have the blessing. The right hand on Ephraim, who is the youngest, and his left hand on Manasseh, who is the eldest. Now Joseph sees this, and he's going to try to correct it. Notice verse 17. Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, so he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. And so Jacob makes it very clear that he knew exactly what he was doing here. And so he says the younger brother, he's going to be greater than the older. and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations, or tribes more specifically. Verse 20, so he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will bless, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. And so here we see that he is going to bless the children of Joseph, and Joseph himself is going to be blessed. Now, when we get to chapter 49, what we're going to see is a listing of the 12 sons and the blessings that they receive. And it's really quite interesting for us, because as the Father is blessing the sons, he is also talking about some of the things that have happened in their life and why they are receiving the blessing that they are receiving and why they are receiving the rebuke that they are receiving. And so for those who had done things that were wrong, Jacob's going to point that out, and that's going to be part of these final words that he has for them. And so here he's going to bring all the sons together before him and then make this blessing at this point, and talking about, yes, their life and the things of the future. And that's what's interesting about this blessing. It's a prophecy and a blessing, because it is going to talk about the future and the kind of descendants they're going to have, the kind of people they are going to be. And we see this taking that course throughout history. We see that as we study our Old Testament. We see exactly as Jacob said, that's what became of the sons and the people that came from those sons. Remember, we're having a great nations of people coming from these sons, or tribes from these sons. And so from these descendants, we're going to see a lot of people. And we're also, in the history of the Old Testament, you're going to see the interaction between the descendants of these sons. How do they treat each other? How do they get along in the future? What is the strength of it, and what is the problems that result because of this? And so here we have Jacob and his sons. You know, it's quite amazing to see the things that have taken place with Jacob in his life. Here we are near the end of his life, and you see the things that he endured all through his days. You see the things that he did early on, the deceptions that he was involved in, punishment because of that, his flight because of that, and then returning and making peace with his brother Esau. But now Jacob's seeing his sons and the descendants and the people that are going to come from all of his sons. And it's quite a pivotal point in Old Testament history to see concerning the 12 sons of Jacob, because they do have such a prominent role in the rest of the Old Testament. Now, specifically, of course, talking about Judah, because from Judah, the lineage is going to be going to the Messiah. Through Judah would come the Christ. And we'll see more information concerning that in our next lesson. We're going to have to stop there, but be sure and read ahead. Go ahead and read the rest of the book. Finish the book as far as reading that, so that you'll know the information that we are going to cover. This is going to be some very important information that we're going to see in chapter 49, and then, of course, closing out in 50. I hope you're enjoying this class. I know that I am. I love this study of the book of Genesis and the things that we can learn, and also because it sets the scene for the rest of the Old Testament, that the things laid down here are going to be so important as we continue our study in the Old Testament. And so we'll have a better understanding of those things in the future when we understand the things that are taking place here in the book of Genesis. And so I hope you are enjoying this, as I say. We'll stop there, and we'll begin at chapter 49 next time. As I always say, the lesson is yours. The information I am giving you from God's Word is for you to take and to use and adjust your life accordingly so that you can be pleasing to God. But it's your own choice. You decide what to do with this information and this newfound knowledge that you have. We'll see you next time.